Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition. Now, the original cut of Batman v Superman was a film that wasn't well received, wasn't well liked, didn't really get any positive reviews. And this was down to the fact that the film just was lacking content. It didn't have enough going on, things didn't make sense, it was inconsistent. And everyone's instant thought, and it was mine as well at the time, was that DC just can't do it like Marvel are doing it. They can't make an extended universe, they can't have multiple major characters in a single film and make it work. Now I kind of slept on this movie for a few years. Like I never came back to it. I never rewatched it. And then I found out there was an Ultimate Edition that I can't really remember how long roughly they released it afterwards, maybe a year or something like that. That came out on Blu-ray and it came with an extra half an hour. I mean, the movie was long anyway. It was like 2.5 hours. So this was just taking it up to 3, and you sort of think, how much can half an hour really change about a movie? Can it really make a substantial difference? And the answer is yes, it can. This is, I think, the first time I've ever seen an Ultimate Edition of a movie, or a special edition, or an extended cut actually save a movie, because that's what this does. It takes that Batman v Superman film, which was maybe a 7 out of 10, 6.5, something like that, roughly, and it takes it up to a 9. In all honesty, I think it really makes such a huge difference to the quality of the film. Now, if you saw the original version, you probably think it's a little bit whack, which is fair enough because it was. But if you haven't seen the Ultimate Edition, and you're a fan of this, if you're a fan of Superman and Batman and DC and all that stuff, you really need to see it. It's not like the extra 30 minutes has like whole, loads of new content, but what it does do is it builds on top of scenes, it builds onto subplots, it adds more depth to everything, and it fleshes things out, which is what makes it a better film. Obviously, one of the main criticisms of Batman v Superman original cut was the bit where Batman decides not to kill Superman because his mother has the same name, and that's what people see it as, his mother having the same name. But this even fleshes that out to an extent, and everything else being fleshed out makes that scene not feel ridiculous like it did at the time. Because obviously in that original cut, Superman just says the word Martha, save Martha, and then Batman just doesn't kill him, and everyone thinks, oh wow, that's like a shit reason not to kill him. But in this extended cut, that's fleshed out, everything's fleshed out, and it just works a little bit better. I'm saying flesh a lot. Flesh. I mean, to give you some context about what's changed, what was added in, what was I'm going to say fleshed again. What was added onto more, I'll talk about some of the scenes that they sort of changed and will, develop more. So that included the opening segment set in Africa, where Lois Lane has travelled out there in order to deal with, to get a story about, some terrorists, that sort of thing. And she gets in trouble, shit amplifies, Superman comes in, saves the day. But it doesn't just stop there. That whole scene is like extended, and you get more backstory to it as well. You get, well, not necessarily backstory, but you see more about that event throughout the film, about the sort of the weight of it. Because a huge theme in this film is, can we trust Superman after the events of Man of Steel? Obviously in Man of Steel, another Kryptonian came, to Earth in order to battle Superman, and it caused a whole lot of destruction on Metropolis, a whole lot of death. And that made people question, like, if this Kryptonian did it, why wouldn't Superman? They're from the same planet. Why wouldn't he do the same? He has the power to, in just like that, he could, destroy the Earth, destroy everyone on it, and there's nothing anyone could do to stop him. And in this sort of introduction scene in Africa, it's all about framing Superman. It's all a ploy by Lex Luthor, who's trying to set up Superman as a villain, as someone who does what he likes, who works outside the law. I mean, in a sense he does, but he's not doing it in like a malicious way or anything like that. He's doing what he thinks is right. He's stopping bad people in order to save the good. But they create this theme where good people die in situations, and they make it look like he's the cause. Additional scenes include more of Gotham City, which is great because you don't necessarily see a whole lot of Gotham because you're mostly based in Metropolis. But you get a fair chunk in Gotham, which is great. My battery's about to die. I'm going to have to change it. Battery changed. Where was I? Gotham City. Yeah, so you actually do get a fair chunk of Gotham City in this film, and you get some additional scenes where Clark Kent goes to Gotham because he's curious about the Bat. He's heard rumours. It's like, I love the way they portray The Batman in this, he's like almost like a legend. You know, like no one really sees him. People just know about him. He's like infamous. And Clark Kent goes to Gotham and he starts doing some like snooping, see what's what, who's who, all that sort of thing. You know, he talks to some people in an apartment building and, you know, they tell him about the Bat. You know, you don't want to mess with this guy. He means business. And just to talk about this version of Batman in association with like these additional scenes, he's a killer in this universe. He's not a Batman that doesn't kill. He doesn't follow the morals, you know, like the Christopher Nolan Batman does. This guy will kill bad people. That's not a problem for him. And what he likes to do is brand people with a bat symbol. He bat brands them. You know, he bat brands this guy like right here. So basically, when these criminals end up in prison, and the other prisoners see they got the bat branding, it's basically a death sentence. Death sentence for anyone that ends up in the slammer, pretty much. You see that happen to one of the criminals. He gets the bat brand. He goes to prison. He gets shanked. And Clark Kent follows up by talking to like the family of the guy who's been murdered in prison. And she sort of, you know, explains what gives this guy the right to be judge, jury, executioner. Which is once again adding on to the whole theme of, you know, Superman himself. You know, people say, oh, this guy's judge, jury, and executioner in a sense. He's got all this free power to do whatever he wants. But then Clark knows about the Bat, and it's like a contradiction almost, because people aren't paying attention to the Bat and what he's doing because he's just a guy in a suit essentially, whereas Superman is a god amongst men. You know, he really has the power to do anything, but he's not necessarily as bad as Batman. You know, in a way he's not, because Superman doesn't go out of his way to kill criminals. You know, he's got the view that criminals should be stopped, not murdered, whereas Batman will just kill criminals. He thinks they're scum of the earth. And those are some really great additional scenes in order to build up, because that is the theme of this movie. That is it. But it's the theme of who gives these people the right to decide what to do to bad people and how to deal with threats. You know, there's a couple other additional scenes in there. They're not as substantial in a sense, but what they do is they just add on to the plot lines, especially the subplots. The subplots really struggled in the original cut of the movie because they just weren't fleshed out enough. They were very, very little, very, you know, barely touched on, barely dealt with, so it felt like pointless filler. And as a viewer, you sort of feel like, well, why weren't they further developed? Why didn't we see more? Why were they in the movie if we're not going to see anything about it? And that's what this Ultimate Edition does. It really just fucking expands everything, gets a closer look at everything. It takes its time, which is what it needed to do. And you know, it's as I said before, people would rather have a long movie than a short one that isn't any good. You know, people want a good film, and everyone, if this 3-hour cut had been in the cinema, everyone would have come out so much more pleased with the product they'd seen. I mean, one important additional scene was a tease for Steppenwolf in this. You know, the Lex Luthor's on the Kryptonian ship that's from Man of Steel, and he's communicating, and he's actually the one that contacts Steppenwolf. I mean, to cut this scene out is fucking ridiculous in all honesty, because it's a setup for Justice League. You know, it's literally telling us why Steppenwolf is coming, because he could have just rocked up in Justice League and we would have all been like, how did this guy know, why did he come to Earth? You know, this is such an important scene that they took out of the original cut. It's so crucial because you're seeing why he's come. It's because Lex Luthor contacted him. I mean, to a degree I understand why they make certain cuts for cinema, but you can't let that hinder the entire film. Fair enough, cut a movie and the original cut still be good, and then any additional scenes is just adding on to it rather than making it better. That's what it should be with an extended cut. It should never make a movie better. It should just add on to it and maybe make it better in a sense that there's more content, but not to the point where it's making it better because the original cut was missing so much. I mean, I've talked a lot about, you know, I'm comparing the two really, but I mean, the film as a whole, this is honestly one of my favourite films of all time that I've seen. It's really grown on me in like recent years. I've rewatched it many times, like probably in the past year or two. And I tell you, the first like 2 hours of this movie, like the first 2 out of 3 hours are honestly some of the best just cinema you ever see. Well, not necessarily cinema, but some of the best bit of filmmaking you will ever see. It is so well structured, so well balanced, just so, the themes, everything, the acting, it's just completely on point. They spend such a good amount of time structuring this movie and setting up the themes. And I love the fact that this wasn't just a a bullshit thing where, you know, Batman was just like, oh, I don't really trust this guy. Let me just fight him. Like they flesh it out so much. One of the early scenes of the movie, I think it's either before the Africa scene or after. I think it might be before, like the first scene. Is you get another view of the end of Man of Steel, which is where, you know, Superman and General Zod are fighting each other in Metropolis, causing all this destruction. And Bruce Wayne has seen it going on. So he travels over to Metropolis, and you see the whole event from his perspective. And that just gives you such a unique view of the chaos of what happened. Because when you watch it from the Man of Steel perspective, you think, oh, I hope Superman wins. And you're not necessarily noticing all the destruction that's going on in the background. But when you see it from Bruce Wayne's perspective, you realise, oh my god, like, this is so bad. Like, the amount of chaos, the amount of death, everything. Straight away, that almost flips you. You're like, maybe I'm rooting for Bruce Wayne in this. That's the thing with this. It kind of conflicts you about who you want to root for. Because obviously, we as a viewer know more about Superman than Batman does at the time. You know, we sympathise with Superman, especially after Man of Steel. But then when you see all this stuff from Bruce Wayne's perspective, it's not necessarily you're rooting for him over Superman, but you sympathise with Bruce Wayne entirely. And part of that's down to how fucking good Ben Affleck is. He is just sensational for Batman. He's the best Batman portrayal I've ever seen. He's better than Christian Bale. In my view, he's more suited to that role. Christian Bale did good, but I'm not sure he was necessarily suited for the role of Batman. Whereas Ben Affleck really, really is. He nails it. And I really hope we get a lot more from him as Batman. I know they've got Robert coming in to do his own... I don't know, that's like a whole different sort of time... Well, it's not timeline, but it's just a whole different thing, you know, running two characters at the same time. You know, there's a lot to talk about in this movie. A lot of it is stuff that we have already seen, or you would have already seen in the original cut if you've seen it. But if you haven't seen the extended version and you sort of didn't like the original cut, or even if you liked it, you have to see this extended version because I think it's one of the best comic book movies out there. It really is. The first 2 hours are just sublime filmmaking, in all honesty. And the reason I say the first 2 hours and maybe not the last is because the last hour is quite action-filled, and even though that's great, you love to see that. It's so fun to see them fighting and stuff and all these other battles going on, you know, with like I think his name's Doomsday, the big CG thing. He wasn't great, but you know, we move. It was decent enough. But the first 2 hours like a really political movie, but it's based on Superman and Batman, so it's like it's so interesting. Like it's almost like a character drama, you know, those first 2 hours, bouncing back and forth between, you know, the morals of these characters and the things they do and who's right, who's wrong. I've really got nothing but praise for this movie. It's, you know, the only weak elements are some bits in that last segment. And, you know, they do a bit of Justice League setup, and I like a bit of subtle setup, but this shit is extremely on the nose. Like, I like the bit where Flash shows up, you know, because I guess he can do time travel or something because of his speed, all that sort of stuff. And he talks to Bruce Wayne. That was a really cool scene. But they get this bit where they've got like you know, Wonder Woman's like chilling on the computer. She's also great in the movie. But yeah, she's chilling on the computer and she's got these files and it has like all the logos for these superheroes. And it's like, who gave them a logo? You know what? Lex Luthor just gave all these guys a logo. And, you know, she watches all these videos for like Cyborg and the Flash and Aquaman. And it's just a bit like, come on. Like, if they just shown a thing that like showed some files with their names or the logos even, you know. But you didn't need to show all that. I think that was a bit... Like, we get it. Set up for Justice League, that's cool. But, I don't know. I feel like it was a bit heavy-handed, a bit on the nose. But it's not a major issue, in all honesty. But yeah, the movie as a whole, like, that additional half an hour really saved this movie. It made it so much better. And we're going to see the same thing with Justice League, I feel. I mean, that first Justice League was really poor. That wasn't just down to the fact that it was missing scenes. It was down to the fact that, you know, Zack Snyder had to walk away from it at the time. Down to the fact that everything else production-wise wasn't as good in terms of, you know, the score, the storytelling, the writing. But, I mean, we're getting a double-length movie from Justice League. We're getting additional scenes. And as a whole, we're just going to get a much better movie, I anticipate. It's definitely not going to be any worse, and it's definitely not going to be the same. It's going to be better. Maybe I'm speaking too soon, but I really don't see why it wouldn't be better. There's no reason for it not to be. Zack Snyder's an incredible filmmaker, you know, just those two movies alone, Man of Steel and Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition, not the original cut. You know, at the end of the day, it's down to studios. They're the reason films fuck up. They're the reason films don't do as well. And it's because nowadays, studios are the ones making films, not filmmakers. You know, it's very rare that you get original movies made anymore. Because studios know what make money, and what makes money is, you know, these franchises and remakes pretty much. You know, take a big name, big title, and just pump money into it and, you know, hire someone to do the job. And, you know, they don't necessarily have to do a good job, it just has to be good enough. And that's kind of where it ends, really, with films these days. But there's hope in this DCU thanks to filmmakers like Zack Snyder, who clearly have a passion to tell a good story. So Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition gets a 9. Gets a 9 out of 10. I'm kind of feeling a 9.5. We'll go in between that bracket. A 9.25. It's an excellent film. I highly recommend it, and I'd say watch Man of Steel, watch Batman v Superman, and then wait for this Justice League 4-hour cut to come out, and you've got yourself a really good trilogy. It's not necessarily a specific trilogy of 3 movies, because you've got a whole lot of other DCEU stuff on the side, but it is a great collection of films.